I want to finish out right now before I take some questions and just push a little more on the architecture of the system with respect to program design and implementation for impact. And as you move forward in this work, and you're certainly more than well poised to do so, I want to draw out this idea of the difference between awareness raising and behavior changing, and the idea that we have initiatives that we want to be able to map onto such a continuum, and some in their own right are exactly meant to raise awareness, and others are going to have to change behaviors if we are going to get to where we need to go. And some of those are going to take more time and money and human capital in order to get there. But so what I want to push on is for you to perhaps think about 3 types of initiatives as you move forward with this work. The first being an awareness-raising initiative, excellent and good in its own right. Certainly the beginning of a strong campaign is about awareness raising. The second type of initiative would be one that imposes a structural change on the system, and I'll say more about that in a minute. And the third would be a capacity building initiative. And eventually, we're going to need a lot of capacity building initiatives to get to where we want to go. So let me walk you through some examples. If we were to take the awareness raising, we'd put, for example, a book drive. That's a very good awareness raising mechanism. It speaks to the importance of books and literacy. Its short-term impacts would be there are warm feelings about literacy, there are more books in the home. There are no evidence of its effects on its own on children's outcomes, and that's fine because it wasn't meant to be a direct service. It was meant to raise awareness in the population. A structural change that I think is very salient to your work now and work across the states in the U.S. is structural change might be a grade retention policy or a class size policy around class size. The short-term impact of those structural changes tends to be a bump in achievement. We often do see a bump when we impose a structural kind of change, like class size reduction or grade retention. The long-term impact of those tends to fade out. We don't tend to get really long-term effects, so we're looking at a sort of a short-run game. So in the research on retention very clearly suggests a fade out, and in fact, in many cases, there are other consequences that come with the fact that this is a student who still struggles, right? So we get social problems, we often get dropout and that kind of thing, because the student is still struggling. The capacity building kinds of initiatives are those that have a much longer run end game in mind, right? They're ones that we imagine taking more time, that require more of an investment, but that have both short-term and long-term impacts. And so here I might give high-quality preschool as an example. I might also provide an example of an initiative that targets the quality of early reading instruction, right? That we get the short-term bump, but we also get a much nicer view and a much healthier population overall in the long run. So as you move forward with this work, you may want to think about that third bucket and really push on these initiatives that would be considered capacity building. So if we take the difference between a structural and a capacity building lever and just imagine that there's a child experiencing difficulties, behavioral or academic, if the school's response is strictly grade retention, then we get a likely outcome that has limited effects and some long-term costs. If the school's response, which is more intensive and more expensive and costly, both in human resources and financial, we get targeted, timely intervention, we're likely to get stronger outcomes. But again, it's a longer run game and it takes a different kind of mindset and a different kind of structure architecturally. So I'm going to sum up there. I'm going to certainly mention that there are lots of individuals who are behind this work. I've been collaborating now at Harvard for about 10 years with different folks and been very graciously supported by a lot of funders.